we have Jennifer Trent here today with us, going to be talking about food waste a little bit. Jennifer Trent is an environmental specialist at the Iowa Waste Reduction Center located at the University of Northern Iowa. Trent has worked on reducing waste in Iowa landfills over the last 3 years, including both food waste and construction and demolition waste. She is also a commissioner with the Soil and Water Conservation District in Black Hawk County. Please help me welcome her.
Good morning. This room is really awesome and cool. Took me about 3 hours to get here this morning. I tried to leave at 6, but didn't really make it. This is the IWRC, is where I currently work. We're at the University of Northern Iowa. We are a business and community outreach organization. What we do, our core mission, is to help small businesses across the state comply with environmental regulations. It's a free service, and it is also confidential. So if we go into a salvage yard, they're dumping oil into the stream, we tell them what they need to do to comply, and if they don't, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it, but that's what we generally do. We also work on reducing pollution, and we work on reducing the amount of materials headed to Iowa landfills. Part of Iowa's tipping fees go to our organization to help small businesses. So when we're helping reduce the amount of weight go to Iowa landfills, we're actually kind of losing money. But that's our goal, and we work very hard at that. For the last 3 years, I have been working on reducing the amount of solid waste going to Iowa landfills. Food waste is a huge topic right now. I don't know if you know that. The United States Environmental Protection Agency and the United States Department of Agriculture had, in September, released a press release that said by the year 2030, their goal is to reduce food waste in the nation by 50%. And they're going to work together on that, and we're going to work with both the USDA and the EPA to realize that goal in Iowa. So I'm sure all of you heard about the issue with food waste. It's just a huge topic. 40% of all the food produced in the United States ends up in the landfill. If you were to track how much food you throw away, you probably wouldn't realize exactly how much that is. It's quite a bit. This is a problem, and most people don't understand why it's a problem. So I will go over this. Food waste costs the United States economy $165 billion a year in disposal costs, transportation costs, loss at markets, loss at grocery stores, which is quite a bit of money. Now, this is a statistic from Feeding America, and this is the most recent statistic that 1 in 6 people in the United States don't know where their next meal is coming from. Last year it was 1 in 5, and last year 1 in 4 children didn't know where their next meal was coming from. I had gone over to Sioux City, and I visited with the food bank of Siouxland and talked to them about this problem in reaching the needy in our country and helping them, find food and be able to have nutritious meals. When you look at how much food is thrown away, and then you realize that 1 in every 6 person you pass on the street is hungry, it's astounding. It's something that we can all do something about, too. Another problem with food waste in the United States is the creation of methane. So methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. So when we put organics in a landfill and we cover it up, it goes anaerobic. And that anaerobic gas escapes from landfills and it releases methane. When you do something like compost food waste, the gas that comes out of that, if you turn it regularly, is carbon dioxide. So methane is far more potent in global warming contributing factor than carbon dioxide. So in the United States, more than 20% of all methane comes from United States landfills. So when we talk about landfills and food waste, and when we talk about Iowa, part of the problem in Iowa is that we have we have three municipal or county compost facilities in the state that currently compost food waste. We have 2 private facilities that compost food waste. When you look at the distribution of these compost sites on the map of Iowa, you will notice that from Des Moines, if you draw a line straight down the state from Des Moines, the only compost facilities in the state are from Des Moines and east. Anything from, if you look at Des Moines and west, there's nothing. There's nowhere. There's no public composting sites, and there's no private composting sites that accept food waste. So, when you talk about throwing away food, if you look at this cow, I'm sorry it's a little blurry, I did stretch a little bit. My marketing people at my office freaked out because they said it looked pretty bad. But if you look at the cost to raise a cow and to provide 1 pound of meat, the energy consumption of raising that cow is the same energy as 1 day in the average household of 4 people. So when you throw away a pound of ground beef, you're wasting a whole day of energy, basically. So in the state of Iowa, 13.3 of the municipal solid waste entering the landfills was food waste in 2011. That was a huge number. From 1998 to 2011, when you compare the tonnage, that's a 62% increase. So we're throwing away more and more and more food, which is contributing to greenhouse gas. And you got all these, people who are hungry. I mean, we can do something about it. Food waste is not a waste when you use it as a resource. And there's ways to use it as a resource. So in Iowa, food waste was number 1 in municipal solid waste and residential sectors. The only sector that it wasn't number 1, it was number 2, was in the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors. That would be your hospitals, schools, restaurants, grocery stores. Oops. So when we look at the food cycle, from start to finish, you have your farm right up here, transportation, processing and packaging, retail and consumer, and then you have your restaurant food down there. This is the cycle of the production of food. Each one of these stops on the food cycle, there's a lot of waste. Farm production has waste, a lot of times fields. If there's no market for the food sits in the field and rots because the cost to pick it is more than the price they'll get for it. Transportation is a huge cost, using up lots of energy and fuel. Packaging and processing, if a fruit isn't perfect and they don't want to process it, it goes in the garbage. And same with grocery stores. If you go in your grocery store, you'll notice every piece of fruit, every vegetable in there looks great. They take the odd-shaped ones and they toss them. That's food. It tastes the same as a regular apple. You have an apple with a big bruise on the side, they'll throw it away. So, throughout the last 3 years, I have been a lot of places in the state of Iowa, going to people who are making a huge difference. One of the first places I went was Grinnell College in Grinnell. The thing that is really cool about Grinnell College is that they have a sustainable ideology. It is a feeling on their campus. Everyone there wants to change it and do better when it comes to food waste and thinking green and sustainable. And they've worked really hard at reducing their food waste in their cafeterias. So what they did was really cool for our state. They have this guy, is there a little, no? They have this guy right here, his name is Howard McDonough, and he is basically a hobby farmer, and he has giant pumpkin fields. And so what he decided to do was he went to Grinnell College, and he said, hey, I have these pumpkin fields, I don't want to spend money on fertilizer, I've looked into composting, how about if you bring me all your food waste? I will compost it on my farm, and then I'll put it on my pumpkin fields. And that's exactly what he does. The middle picture is his compost site. He turns it once a month. He shares his compost with the community, and he gives some back to Grinnell College, and Grinnell College is able to save a lot of money and divert their food waste from the landfill straight to Howard. And Howard was a cool guy. When I went and visited him, he said, come over to my machine shed. There's something I want to show you. So I walked over to his machine shed, and there is this 60-year-old carousel in his shed. And he said, I just got it working. Get your favorite horse, sit down. And so he plugs it in, sitting on a horse, going around and around in his machine shed. It was weird, but it was cool. Grinnell College feeds about 2,000 people, students, faculty, and staff per day in their marketplace cafeteria. When they initially started, they were going to tackle food waste. They were in the process of redesigning their cafeterias. So they made allowances for a food pulper and room for garbage cans for food waste, and an easy way for their garbage trucks, their campus garbage trucks, to pick up food waste. So they send all their pre- and post-consumer food waste to Howard's farm, which diverts about 1,500 pounds every week. So this is not going to the landfill. This is actually going back into the soil to feed the soil, which in turn feeds the plants. Here's another really cool place. Has anyone here been to Bluebird Diner? Oh, their food is so good. John Wilson and Thomas Connolly, they're the owners in Bluebird Diner. They have one in Iowa City and North Liberty. They are very sustainable thinking. They decided that they wanted to divert their pre- and post-consumer food waste. And so what they did, they got a solid waste alternatives program grant from the Iowa DNR. And they created this garbage area that would make it really easy for Johnson County Refuse to pick up their food waste and take it to the Iowa City landfill that currently does food waste composting. So the reason they decided to do this was not only their sustainable thinking, but it was also positive PR. And they get so much positive PR from what they're doing. And we have a video on our IWRC webpage interviewing Thomas Connolly about their reduction and how it's done and the challenges that they see while they're doing it. And this is another place that we visited, Unity Point Health in Des Moines. Unity Point Health also has a sustainable ideology. And in their kitchens, they started with food waste reduction. When they would have vegetable trimmings, they would weigh them and record it, and then they would set goals according to how much pre-consumer food waste they had. They would look in these buckets and they would say, "Oh, here's a broccoli. We can include the stems in soup. Let's not throw that away." And they actually have reduced quite a bit of food waste. Once they got the reduction mastered, they moved on to composting. They hired a private hauler to pick up their food waste, and the private hauler takes it to their own private composting facility. That is Green RU and Chamness Technologies in Eddyville. So all of these organizations and everyone I've talked to has challenges in reducing food waste. Over the last 3 years, we've done multiple workshops across the state to help people reduce food waste, give them ideas, tell them where to start. And we surveyed everybody that we helped. This was so interesting to me because these are the challenges that organizations are currently facing with reducing food waste. Number one is cost. Number two is the lack of education. So with the lack of education, we need to get the word out. We need to let people know it's easy. You can do it in your backyard. You can donate to food banks and pantries. And to me, cost may not be a factor. If you factor how much your garbage is going to a landfill, most places that accept food waste charge less for food waste than they do for regular garbage. Or sometimes it's a break-even thing. But when we look at cost, in Iowa, The average tipping fee for garbage is $35 a ton. And this is part of the problem. With $35 a ton, that's insanely cheap. So when you look at a large organization or corporation, it's not worth it to them to spend the money to implement a program when they could just dump it in the landfill for $35 a ton. If our tipping fees were higher, maybe people would be less likely to throw food waste away. I know in the Cass County landfill tipping fees are $90, and they have less food that shows up in their landfill than a lot of the other landfills in the state. So here are some things that we can do. The Iowa Waste Reduction Center has a website. It's iwrc.org, and we have a Google map, and we have identified as many pantries as we could in the state, all the food banks, and they list where these places are that accept food donations. So if you're going through your cupboards and you find a can of peas that expired, a month ago, they'll take it. Same with restaurants, they'll take the food from restaurants. Grocery stores, if you have a local grocery store, you should stop in and say, hey, what are you doing with this food that's not perfect that you don't want to set out on the shelves? Or let's say a package came off, but the food is still great. What are you doing with it? This is important. This is an easy step, and by just asking, you can make a difference. Feeding animals. This one is pretty simple. If you want to feed food waste to hogs, you can only feed it to them if it's your own food waste and your own hogs. You cannot bring in outside food waste and feed it to your hogs, unless you heat it to 212 degrees for 30 minutes. Who's going to do that? I don't know. It'd be pretty fun though. But you can feed your chickens. You can feed any animal that's a ruminant. You can feed food waste. And then there's 3 biodigesters in the state of Iowa that accept food waste. There's one in Stockton, Iowa called Agri-Renew. There's one in Riceville called Vega Ox Energy, and the Amana Colonies has a biodigester. They all accept food waste, and they're all looking for a constant stream of food waste. They don't want a garbage truck once every 3 months. They want something that they can count on, because the recipes to run a biodigester, if they mix it up, it can cause lots of operation problems like foam and all kinds of stuff. And then there's composting. My nickname is the Composting Queen. I am United States Composting Council certified as a compost operator. This was me and my team up here over by Los Angeles with our compost pile. That was the hand squeezing the compost is doing a water test. And then there's a grinder and of course a thermometer. And composting is easy. One of the things that we're doing at Iowa Waste Reduction Center is trying to get organizations to compost. But I've kind of just realized that it might be easier to get individual residents to compost instead of a huge organization to start composting, because I feel like people are more receptive than maybe management would be. So if you want to start changing the food waste situation in Iowa, these are some things that you need to do. If you're going for a big organization, hit up management first. They're the ones who make the decisions. You need their support. Go to your city councils, county board of supervisors. If you have a yard waste compost site in your city, you can add food waste as long as it's pre-plated, fruits and vegetables. You don't need a permit. There are no requirements through the DNR. Start small with tracking food waste and setting goals, and then move on towards bigger things like composting, biodigesting, and of course donations always easy too. And that's it. Thank you.